Thank you. To start with, I will tell you that I got tricked by Labiotech, because when they invited me to this conference, I said, yes, of course. I thought I would come to a panel and say a few interesting things, and that would be it. But then Philip said, well, no, you're going to have to actually do a talk with some slides. And I thought, okay, that's less appealing to me. But anyway, I'm gonna try something, and I'll tell you about the title, because that was also caused me some questions. But I thought, because we have a few minutes, I thought I would, spare a few minutes to give you some advertising about our own firm. So at least a few of those minutes will be on Sofinnova. So, and then we'll get into the subject. So, for those who don't know us, we are a firm based in Paris. We invest across Europe and the US. It's certainly 2/3 Europe, 1/3 US. We've been in existence for a long time, since the 70s. And we have 1.6 billion under management. We are 100% focused on life sciences. And we raised our last early stage funds about 2 years ago. It's a 300 million euro fund. And what we want to do, what we set out every morning to do, is to build game-changing companies around exceptional biopharma, medtech, or industrial biotech entrepreneurs. So about the team, because we'll go back on people, I think this is essential in any market, but in ours as well. And I think one of the things that we are particularly proud of is that we've built a team which is very unique, I think, in diversity. And there's some diversity, not just gender, but also nationalities in the European-based firms or in the US. But I think we are quite different from most, with people from many different countries. 20 years ago, when I joined, we were all French. So I think I think it's an achievement. And that's what we do. So we are very focused. We do therapeutics only, or certainly it's the main focus of what we have. We will look at other things, but it's a small part. And because it's tough out there, we are trying to focus on companies that will ultimately generate something game-changing. We'll go back on that, because to me that's the real theme of today. Is the next big thing has to be something that brings something game-changing for a number of people. And then the last, but certainly not least, and we'll also go back to that, is about the entrepreneurs. I won't say much right now. That's just a slide of the fonts are all wrong on the computer. I didn't check that, but anyway, this is one of the reasons we've done okay, is that we've had many different transactions over the last period. Say that's 6-7 years. We had many companies that went public, that got sold, or who did very well on the stock exchange, or went public and then got sold. So, and that's just, I think, is something that you see across Europe, and that's why we have people here and other investors from many different European funds. Is that the whole industry has actually done pretty well. And we can always beat ourselves thinking we are not as good as the US or whatever, but we've done a huge amount of work over the last, certainly 20 years, in the last decade, where you had many companies that are now proper companies. We have 20 billion or plus euro companies in Europe, and I think that's something I think is amazing. I'm an optimist by design, but I think that those are real facts. So now, the next big thing in biotech, that's the title I was given. I mean, I'm an investor. I'm not an aura, and I'm certainly not. I think the scientist able to tell you what's the next big thing in biotech, according to me. So that's going to be a short presentation. You're thinking. So I mean, what are venture investors? So they're looking for the next big thing. But I'm sorry, I forgot about that slide. What are venture investors? This is what we do. We are out there. We are looking at all the waves. Their shape, their height, of course. I'm not a surfer, but I think it's probably people have researched what is it to really look for the waves, and I think a lot of it is, of course, recognizing the patterns, and a lot of it is also about timing. And we'll go back on that, because I think for the next big thing, timing is absolutely essential. The science is there. All the things I'm going to talk about, in fact, we've talked about all of those today. The question is where we are where are we in this timing that would allow us to make something really, really big from whatever those technologies are. So, I mean, if you think about timing and you look at the next slide, possibly. Here we go. So, you know, just think about this, whether these are a group of investors, all of us investors here, and you're thinking, okay, there's a few guys that are at the top of the wave, right? You think it's a good thing because normally you'd be able to go on the other side and serve this whole thing to the beach, and then you can retire. A few guys are thinking, shit, that's the wrong wave, and going back the wrong way. Some guys are going to get drowned, that's for sure. So that's the venture industry, you know, in the midst of figuring out what's the next big thing. And waves come and go, right? So it's really about something that is as simple as you know, what I'm describing here. So I thought if I just show these two slides, Philip is never going to invite me next year. So I have to sort of figure out something slightly more, you know, substantial. So I talked about timing. I guess you all know about this Gartner curve. It's been used and, you know, abused, and I'm going to abuse it today on technology, you know, technology cycles. And is this a good technology cycle? So where are we? But I think for timing, and if you think about biotech, it's perfect because, you know, we can, and I'm going to ask you to look at the various technologies that I'm talking about, that you know about, thinking, where are we on that curve? Because that has a huge impact for us investors, but also for you biotech entrepreneurs. So, you know, everyone knows about, you know, technology trigger. We get excited by technologies and we think that's the next big thing. And then this goes to a huge peak of inflated expectations. And then something happened. Could be generated from the outside world. It could be just some data that is not really good. And then trough of disillusionment. And then everyone thinks that this is the last thing one wants to do. And then, okay, because data starts coming, and then you onto this slope of enlightenment, and ultimately, you know, people make money. So that is, I know, for IT companies in general, but I think it's perfectly adaptable to the life sciences. The utmost example, of course, is antibodies. If you think about when antibodies were invented and how long it took, and people got excited, and you know, the first few companies started on this idea, and then everything just collapsed. So it took far too long, and people just didn't know what to do with this toolbox until, okay, and I guess the plateau of productivity is a lot steeper in the antibody space. And sometimes you have different Gartner curve, one after the other, and I think that's also something we need to figure out. So now for the boring part, I'll tell you about some of the things, and then that we've already talked about today, but trying to figure out, is this really the next big thing? And are we, you know, where are we on that curve? So 3 things that I propose here. Again, but wait 2 seconds. No big news. Immuno-oncology, is that the past next big thing? Or is this the future next big thing? One of the things that for me is very, very interesting is that, if I understand, the total sales of immuno-oncology drugs, PD-1s, PD-L1s, you know, CTLA-4, all these, 2.5 billion in sales. The overall oncology market is about 100 billion. So is this the next big thing, or is this the future next big thing, or is it none of those? And people are going to be so disappointed. We'll talk about that in the next few slides. So I personally think, if I say immuno-oncology, yeah, of course, immuno-oncology. But we're certainly not there yet. And we are to discover over the next 5 years, I'd say, whether it is a huge thing, and then ultimately maybe 50% of the market will be immuno-oncology drugs, possibly. Rare disease, come on, is that the next big thing? We've done rare disease for a long, long time. You know, Genzyme started this all these years ago. But you'll see that it is a growing percentage of the industry, 1. And 2, I think it's very important because we venture investors see it all the time. Often, most of the companies, if you come in and say, we have a great treatment for heart failure, you know, there's no way you're going to get funded. If you tell us there's this small indication that we want to go after, that is an orphan indication, but if you're successful here, this may be a path to something else. So that's not just it's the next big thing, it's the business model is the next big thing. Is how companies get started, how they get funded, with the idea that you can actually explore a smaller indication and then go for something much bigger. We had a whole session with BioNTech. RNA, I think, is still the very, very beginning. Everyone knows about RNA. Is that the next big thing? We'll give you a few slides about that. So, again, to me, this is the history. I'm not going to go through that. I remember we, Sofinnova, did an investment in 1995 called immuno-designed molecule. Yeah, you can see Holger smiling. Yeah, we lost money, okay. But, you know, so this was timing. This was a company that was taking monocytes from the blood of patients, was boosting them into dendritic cells, was arming them with cancer-specific antigens, was re-injecting them, and was actually, you know, was doing, had some wonderful clinical data in mesothelioma. You know, some of the other companies in CAR-T and others are going for the same indications. So this was 20 years before CAR-T. Okay, it's different, but you know, this was already there. The idea that you could boost the immune system using the immune system to get at cancer is not the next big thing. It's not the current big thing, but still the potential, according to me, is in front of us. And the reason, if I manage to get to the next slide, oops, no, here we go. The reason I think there's still huge unknown, and again, we'll go back to the curve, but huge potential is this graph, is the amount of combination trials. We talked about combination. There are 700 combination trials out there. You know, ASCO last week, 700 combination trials. So many of them, so that also means strategically for the companies in oncology, and we've got quite a few, we'll mention some of that. You know, you need to be really, really clever at going through. It's not just new innovation and everyone's going to be successful. You need to be very strategic and tactical about how you go about in order to succeed. So so for the next 2-3 years, I suppose the pharma is going to be sort of on the sidelines, looking at who will win, and then data ultimately, very likely combination data, will tell the world where one should go. Right now, at ASCO, it was IDOs. IDOs were all over the place. Everyone, woof, goes IDOs. Tomorrow, maybe it's something else. Hopefully something we have in the portfolio. That would be good. So yes, you can see, as I said, you know, investors, we don't really 100% know what's the next big thing. So we need to give it a try and have investments in various areas of oncology in order to make sure that we don't miss that wave, that we are right before, right after, on top of the wave, ideally not, you know, like immuno-designed molecules 20 years before and miserably fail. So here, you know, Iomix, actually a German company. You were mentioning about raising money at an early stage. I think we did a $40 million Series A, tranched, of course, with a US fund and ourselves for new targets in immuno-oncology, because we think there's actually a world out there for new targets in immuno-oncology. Argenx, you heard about Masoud earlier, so something addressing the tumor microenvironment, depleting those categories of cells that are responsible for you know, resistance or escape of the medication from the tumor. Crescendo in the UK, multi-specific inhibitors, very able to carry different drug in the immuno-oncology space, and HOOKIPA in the cancer vaccine Norwegian company. So, you know, we certainly think that all of those will be hugely successful, but you know, we'll have to see. So here, back to the Gartner, you have your own idea. I personally think that we are, at best, sort of quite high up next to the peak of inflated expectations in immuno-oncology. It doesn't mean it's not a huge next big thing, but it means that we should be really careful how deep and long the trough of disillusionment will be. And I think it's going to be the next 2 years. We know it's going to be the next 2 years with the data. You see how BMS was affected by their lung data. You know, so the whole, if BMS, you know, coughs, the whole industry can get a cold, and that may happen. So I think it's likely. Therefore, we should be careful, and we should know and aim for the slope of enlightenment. And that's, if you fund a company for the next 2-3 years, you want to go there. You want to make sure you can cross that chasm. So, sorry, the fonts are really not what they were supposed to be on my computer, but orphan disease, and I'll stick to that. I think, that quote there are 7,000 rare diseases out there affecting, 7% of the population. Most of those are children. And only 300 of those disorders currently have treatment. So this was at the onset of Genzyme, if you know the story from the beginning, and that made a company that ultimately was sold, $20+ billion to Sanofi. So, and as I said earlier, I personally think that the way the new technologies out there, the sequencing technologies, the ability to impact the disease mutations with new technologies, may they be CRISPR, and you've noticed I didn't put CRISPR in the next big thing, but I certainly didn't put it there. I think has to change the importance of orphan drugs in the next decade. Look at this quote. There's been 582 requests for orphan drug designation from biopharma companies in 2016, 5 times more than the year before. I'm not sure that those statistics matter, but for sure, people have gone on to the fact that you could address small disease, and that may actually take you to a market that will be worth going after. There may be plenty of questions about, can the market afford the fact that we have all sorts of diseases that are extremely costly for the for society in general. And that's another question which I think may need to be answered. But overall, I think for sure the science and the demand from the patient population, from the patients, means that there's going to be a lot more orphan disease, and that ultimately, I would say, the turnover from orphan drugs will dramatically increase over the next few years. We have a number of bets on the orphan side: Procure in the Netherlands, Labiotech in France, Amino in Switzerland, Breath in Germany. I think one of our last deals. So, two deals. Our last 2 deals are in Germany, which is really new compared to, it's probably 12 or 13 years since we did a deal in Germany. So something is happening in this country, which is also why I'm here today. I can't remember where the next slide is, so we'll have to see. I think it's the Gartner. Oops. Here we go. So yeah, there as well, I think on the orphan drugs, there has been many of those. If you think back, I mentioned about Genzyme, but there are many other companies that went onto this. The early biotech companies went onto this cycle. Today, not just small companies develop orphan drugs. The whole pharma has transformed themselves into orphan players. That I think is non-sustainable for reasons that I mentioned earlier. But clearly, I think we are in the slope of enlightenment for the orphan drugs. But the slope is actually quite a nice steep one. So on the RNA's front, again, we had the talk from Sean at Biotech. So I personally believe that there's going to be a huge amount of drugs on the RNA level, a huge amount of technology that use RNA, not just the Moderna and the Biotech, but there's going to be many different companies that harness the power of the RNA to develop drugs. Mentioned about Argenx's drug, which is a immuno-oncology drug, was derived from a platform that is a microRNA platform. So I really believe that there's a huge amount of growth there. Moderna, Biotech need to pull that wave and make sure that drugs get to market, more drugs get to market. But I think that's really on the. This is not working very well. Sorry. So, and one of the, look at the investments in RNA, and we talked about BioNTech and all the huge deals that they did. Moderna, having raised billions privately, and CureVac, is in that game. So, with a lot of those funds, I think a lot of those technologies will basically go to generate drugs and ultimately be the next big thing. So here, for me, we are still quite early on this technology trigger, so there's many more years for us to make investments in RNA and profit from that huge slope. But, okay, as I told you, immuno-oncology, RNA, orphan drugs, okay, those are the next big things that you know. For me, the most important, and if you look really at the successes of the companies, the 20 billion euro companies in Europe, but also all of the companies in the US. And what I'm going to say is quite cheesy, but I absolutely believe in this. I think this is the fundamental thing that makes or breaks this industry. And the next big thing is clearly the patient. Because whatever the technology, and whatever, whether it's an antibody, a small molecule, CRISPR, who cares? The only reason that makes a company a success is its ability to bring a product to market that answers an unmet medical need. There's no other way to do that. And you can re-engineer, sort of make the history back and look at it and re-engineer history, basically tell you, I told you CRISPR was going to be the next big thing. It makes no sense, to be honest. And I think, again, antibody generation is the perfect example, because everyone thought that was going to cure everything, and then it took a long time to realize that it's not the antibody that is important, it's what the antibody can do that allows you to get unmet medical needs sorted. So I wanted to show you, I mentioned one of the companies that is incredibly focused on the patient, and that drove certainly the technologies that they looked for in order to address that company. And that company is Procure. And it's a publicly listed company now in the Netherlands. I think what's really interesting is that it was started, I don't know if you know, but it was started by a guy that was not from our industry. He was an IT guy, happened to have a son who had cystic fibrosis, and he was desperately trying to find a solution for his son. That was what he was at. He stopped his job, started a patient organization, and looked for, what can I do for my son? And then, he came, he met a number of people, and I'll talk about that later on, and created a company. And then today, basically, as you will see, went from this passion, determination to solve a problem for one person to solve problems, hopefully, for a lot of other people. So I've asked them if I could just show you their film. Can you run the film? It's about a few minutes, but I think that's what's the next big thing, is they're focusing on what's really important, which is ultimately the patient. Thanks. Do you see that's what VCs do? When things work, we take credit for it. I really like Procure, as you can imagine, but I really believe that that's really the next big thing is companies that are passionate and who are determined to find a solution for a problem. Here, this was started from a personal situation, but many other companies have just devised this business plan without any personal involvement in it. And as I said, I invested in this guy who's not an IT, who's not a life science professional, because I was convinced that there was the energy that was going to actually revolutionize the world and potentially be the next big thing. So, people for us investors clearly is the next big thing, and I know that sounds a little bit too much, but and that's the slide that you didn't see before, which is the entrepreneurs of our portfolio, and there are many more, but the slide's too small, that made money for us, determined to change the world in their own way. So I'm not going to go through them, but those are, and if you come to our offices, their portraits is in the corridor. And because that's what we invest in. That's the next big thing. Is who's going to be on that wall. When I make an investment, I want that new person to be on our wall, because that would mean that they would have actually changed their world. And by the way, there's a few of those guys who are there several times, which is also very, very nice for us. Silvano Spinelli here, the sixth one, is there twice on the wall. Philippe Drault is there twice. So once we have someone who's the next big thing, we want the next big thing, and ideally those people have a role, I think, in today's environment to make sure that they continue on to show the way for how you build the company. So the last slide, I think, is a picture of someone that I think is the person that has impressed me the most over my 23-year career, and he was the next big thing. He clearly invented almost this business, and I just want to pay respect to him, because you'll see. Thank you. Here we go. Henry Termeer, and I don't know who of you knew him. I actually didn't really know him. I knew him, of course, on paper, because everyone knows Henry Termeer, founder of Genzyme. And, I bumped into him a few times over the last 20 years, but he was a seed investor in Procure, that company I mentioned. He was a board member of Moderna. If you look at the investment that he made post-Genzyme, this guy, and when you talk to the guy, and many of our CEOs, we made sure that they spoke to him. I say in the past because you probably know he passed away 2 weeks ago. He was coming back from a Procure board where we spent 2 days with him, and that's the next big thing. Unfortunately, he's not there anymore. But finding this next guy who's going to be thinking about the patient, this guy was thinking about the patient. That's how he created Genzyme in a very hard, different environment. And we should all be thinking, what can we do to emulate what this guy did? And if you concentrate on that, if you concentrate on, if you're determined to bring something with the benefit of patients in your mind, ultimately we might have many more of these amazing people like Henry Termeer in Europe. So it's not, I'm not stopping on a sad note. Again, I really liked Henry and was impressed at the speed at which his neurons fired. But that also means that you cannot rely on your laurels, that you need to make sure there's an ecosystem, an industry to make sure that many other people are able to carry on the task and find the next big thing. So that was it. Thank you.